My guest on this week's episode of Suds Search is Shannon McGuirk, Client Services and Delivery Director at Aira. Shannon is an in-demand speaker. She's presented at MozCon, BrightonSEO, Learn Inbound, and Outreach Conference. Shannon is considered one of the world's leading experts on digital PR and link building. At this year's MozCon, Shannon delivered one of my favorite presentations. The title of the presentation was Lessons in Surviving the COVID News Agenda and What It Means for the Future of Digital PR. As many of you probably know, most conference presentations are barely veiled sales pitches about everything an agency does well. Charts always go up when they're talking about themselves and down whenever they're talking about someone else. In reality, the pandemic was challenging for many agencies. Aira lost 50% of their revenue early on. Shannon's presentation gave the listener transparency into the challenges, stresses, and ultimately the ingenuity of the team at Aira. I couldn't wait to have Shannon on the show to discuss her MozCon talk. This discussion isn't theoretical. Shannon tells us about the real-life challenges of being a leader in an award-winning digital marketing agency when things go sideways. Grab something cold to drink and join me for a conversation with Shannon McGuirk. We'll talk about her personal growth during the pandemic, what lessons she learned doing digital PR when half of the journalists were furloughed, and I'll spend a little time talking about leadership during a time of crisis. Shannon McGuirk, welcome to Suds Search. How you doing?
Yeah, really good, thank you. Really good. And you got my name right. That's amazing. People never get my last name right, so thank you for that.
I try. So, listen, I am really excited to have you on because I heard your MozCon talk, and I'd like to ask you all about it. It was like one of the top ones, if not the top one, at MozCon. So it's really interesting. It's very topical for right now. It's about the topic of the talk is lessons in surviving the COVID news agenda and what it means for the future of digital PR. So this is a very interesting topic to kind of set the table. The agency you work for, Aira, you said lost 50% of your revenue during the pandemic. So you had some recovery, you had some good signs, but despite all these things that were working, you know, things weren't shaking out right. And part of this is a personal story about you. So it's illuminating, even though it's a personal story for you, it's illuminating, I think, for anyone in our industry. And that's what I really captured my interest in the talk right away. So you have this slide that says, I grew up fast. Are you willing to share some of the personal lessons you learned during the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think before going into some of those details, what would be really good is to explain to you how the talk came about.
Okay.
So I actually pitched in a completely different talk to MozCon, and it was all agreed. I was working through it with the team. It was all going well. I pulled the deck together and something just wasn't gelling. Like it was a very tactics-based talk. And 2 weeks before the presentation, I went to the MozCon team and said, this doesn't feel right. It's not quite working for me. When I speak, I have to it has to link into something that like the agency has gone through or make it really genuine. Like it has to be a journey that we've been on. So I went into the Aira boardroom with Paddy, my boss, and was like, this is what I want to talk about. That I want to talk about Aira's journey and how we've kind of gone through this link building digital PR storm thanks to COVID, and how now we're coming out the other side of it, because it has completely changed the industry, especially within the UK. It's far more competitive now. The news agenda is far more unpredictable. There are so many different topics dominating it that looking back to look forward was really important. So I turned that deck around very, very quickly. Moz were amazing at being supportive, and I'm sure at that point the team could have said, no, don't do it. But they supported me the whole way through it. There were a couple of really late nights, but we got there. And I'm really proud of kind of what came out of the other side, because I don't think most agencies out there would bear all, probably in the way that Aira does. Because, you know, I have a PR background. I am a PR. Some would say it's not great for brand and isn't great for sales and stuff like that. But part of who we are as an agency is about bearing all, so that everybody can learn and that everybody can grow and we can all grow in our roles. So my personal growth, to go back to your question, has probably been huge. 18 months ago, I started in the pandemic as kind of just trying to get our clients links and coverage, because that's kind of what pays the bills. Coming out the other side of it, it's kind of crazy to say it, and I sometimes get really awkward about explaining my current role now, because it feels like I don't deserve it still. But yeah, I run like I run 4 teams now, so not just PR, but paid, search, the client services, digital team, and SEO, as well as creative and PR. So I've kind of gone on this journey of being a real, I guess, specialist digital PR or marketer to now pretty much making the team happy, ensuring that they've got the best environment to succeed in, and just removing blockers. Like, I laugh and joke and say that my goal is to basically be like a snowplow and just get all of the things out of the way for the experts so that they can do their job. So in order to do that, it hasn't been easy. Like, going back to that point around personal growth, I had to let go of a lot, and I had to learn how to let go of a lot, which, yes, there were some sleepless nights, but I have an amazing team around me. I couldn't do my job without our head of digital, our head of creative and PR, and the team leads that they've got, and I'm really thankful for the journey that they've been on with us as well. They've trusted the decisions that we've made and that we've come through. But yeah, it's been a real eye-opening experience. I was actually just on a call yesterday where I was talking to one of the consultants that we work with and said, I think I've learned in an 18-month period, I think I've learned probably what some may have learned in like a 5 or 6 year period. And whilst there's been ups and downs, I'm hoping that, we'll continue to look back on this and go, it was a bit difficult at times, but we're coming good now. We're coming out the other side.
No, I love how you've set this up, because it's a credit to your agency and to you to really bear it all. Like, you didn't go for an easy speech or anything like that. You really did a hard speech.
No.
I think, just for our audience, I think it'd be helpful if it's not too repetitive, to understand the problem better. Before you can solve a problem, you got to understand. And you go into the gory details of being reliant on the news, the timing. It's impossible to break through. If you could, I know this is going to be a big open question, but if you could help our audience maybe understand this better, like, what was this big problem that came about because of the pandemic?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's probably 2 ways we can attack this question. So the first part of it will be giving you guys some insight as to kind of what happened within the agency. So one of the slides I had was that we lost 50% of our revenue. That happened quite thick and fast. So we had, and it wasn't clients trying to get out of contracts and stuff like that. It was a lot of clients in specific industries that were really hard hit, and they were coming to us and they were like, look, the business isn't in the place that, it should be. Can we pause until we understand what's going on? And of course, we're on this journey with clients. Like, Aira's growth is tied into our clients' growth, and we want to do right by them. We were all in this really, really unknown, uncertain situation and trying to just help each other through it. So that 50%, it wasn't just, clients trying to sack us in that phase. It was coming openly to us and saying, look, can we pause? Can we just take a rain check on things? Because our whole industry is kind of on its knees. We were particularly hit hard in the PR and content team because we had quite a few travel clients. And then we all know how hard that industry was hit very, very quickly. As soon as the lockdowns came in, especially again within the UK, travel just stopped. We weren't allowed to leave our homes and stuff like that. So that's probably the context as to why there was a business pressure, because the revenue that we did have, again, on the flip side, there were some industries that were doing really well. So some clients benefited from this, some really didn't. But that meant that there was a real pressure for those clients that were with us to perform and to harvest these opportunities and stuff like that. And we were there to try and help them do that. But when furlough and stuff came in, that meant that we had to make some really challenging business decisions to slim the team down and reduce headcount in order to get our business through it as well. So it was a bit of a cooking pot in terms of the situation we were in. Now, what that therefore meant is that from a PR and content perspective, we work in, and our entire link building and digital PR campaign strategies are around evergreen content. We try and avoid one-hit wonders so that our clients get the most ROI out of their creative campaigns, and we're making these content pieces work as hard as they possibly can. So to give you an example, one campaign that we launched for a large engineering client, it doesn't go viral overnight. That's never the goal. But within a 6 to 12 month period, we had more than 100 links, and some of those links were from the World Economic Forum, the UK government sites and stuff like that. So it's a build kind of over time that we go for. Now, those campaigns that we had planned 3 to 6 months in advance, because our whole world had turned
Right.
upside down and the news agenda had turned upside
Right.
down, it meant that they weren't relevant, especially in some of those
Right.
industries like travel, very, very inspirational campaigns. You should travel here for your summer holidays. Here's the best 5 stars hotels in Europe, that kind of thing. We can't be trying to encourage consumers to get on airplanes when there's a global pandemic. So it meant that all these forward-looking campaigns that we had lined up,
I
we
know.
had to revisit, and we were having to like re-ideate and stuff like that really quickly. That combined with the pressures of COVID news and stuff that was going on there, it was almost like, and I'm sure you guys had this too, you're waking up in the morning and you're seeing something else evolve in terms
Right.
of the COVID stories. Like, is there another I don't know, let's take the death toll, for example, or are there specific cities where there
Right.
is huge
More up.
outbreaks
Yep.
and stuff like that? And it meant that we just get couldn't get the stories that we had as easily into the news anymore, because suddenly these aspirational stories and these informational stories, they just didn't stand up to the issue that everybody was facing in their lives.
Oh my gosh. And it's so true. Like one of the things you really get an insight into the way you do things is like you're serving two masters when you're doing this. You have the client who has their demands, but then you have the journalist who you have to appeal to. And that's a complicated human problem too. So what happened, one of the things I didn't even think of this is like the journalists aren't working anymore. So they've been furloughed,
Yeah.
right? They take me
Yeah.
through that relationship and the journalist component and how it was uprooted.
Yeah, so that was something that we noticed quite early on. So for example, we use BuzzStream for our outreach, and we were noticing that we were getting a lot of out of offices or a lot of replies around journalists not being in their offices and in their current roles. So just as much as our clients were kind of suffering and finding it difficult to get through this bumpy period, so were media, publishing houses, and news sites and stuff like that. They were placing their teams on furlough. They were slimlining down, which meant that in some instances, where there were teams of 15 writers, they'd drop down to 5, but they still have the same amount of PRs trying to get the same amount of stories
Oh
in,
my
like,
gosh.
and trying to shoehorn stuff in. So it just meant that in an already really competitive space with a competitive industry, the bar went from here, like, to here. And we ended up in some instances, having to pull together entire packages for writers. So not just sharing our campaigns in terms of data and embed codes and stuff like that, but making sure that the journalists had case studies, writing up preliminary copy and helping with quotes and all of this stuff, so that you were pretty much giving them this package and going, here's everything that you need. What else can we do to get this kind of landed? And that worked really well. The other side of it, and kind of touched on with some of the points there around the evergreen campaigns, is that we very quickly learned that the best way to offer a journalist what they need in terms of value and stuff like that with the story from some of our clients was to just monitor the news and react to it. So if there was a story coming out about a specific thing in an industry or how COVID was changing things, very quickly pulling together a comment or researching data and getting that over to them was like, that pulled through quite well in the early
Wow.
days.
Yeah.
And it's a really traditional PR tactic, right?
Right.
That's just newsjacking. So
Wow, it's fascinating. And I mean, I'm feeling it again, but there are so many things about this talk that gave me anxiety, as you're going through it. It's like the idea, there's like this part that really clicked with me where there's this idea of like a content calendar where even in localized, we're putting together content calendars. And this is that laborious but important process to help turn strategy into action, all that stuff. Like you mentioned how much of a long-term view you guys have. And now you have to like turn on a dime and bob and weave with each new news clip, and newsjacking becomes a thing. If you can, take me through if I'm a fly on the wall at your agency, what's going on? Now you have to do it all over Zoom. We have like technology channels inside. How did you change from that long-term view to, bobbing and weaving to each new news clip?
Yeah, so we pretty much pulled together. So we called it like a war room. It was literally like our digital
Right.
PR war room, and We had morning meetings before kind of, so we're quite lucky. We have flexi time at Aira, but a lot of the PR teams start earlier, at the 8 o'clock kind of starting time. And we would jump online at 9 o'clock. We would have a meeting every single morning, review the news agenda, say, I'm going after this story for this client. There's an opportunity here for this client. And it was almost like a bit of a scrum mentality that we had, where we would come together first thing, decide what we were going to do, who's owning what, go away and get stuff done, come back together on Slack or in our little pods, whatever it may be, tick the boxes in terms of those outputs. And then doing that and having that process every single day meant that we could work short term in the here and now and be on the pulse of the media. But then we also had some of our senior content strategists just constantly keeping an eye on the longer tail stuff and editing those content strategies out. So it was really the two different roles that we have at Aira. So those senior kind of content strategists that were looking at the longer term view, and our quick, hungry PR outreach team that were just like, I'm going for it, dust yourself off and keep going.
Oh my gosh. Such an interesting business lesson. I mean, at the end of the day, you still got to build links, right? I doubt very much that your clients cut you any slack because of all this. So how can you possibly, keep up the performance for clients in this climate like that you're going through? Was it kind of figure it out as you go along, or what did you find?
Yeah, so there were a couple of tactical things we did. So again, like in the nature of being honest and stuff like that, our account managers were very much holding on to the relationships with our clients, calling them up, saying, here's the challenges that we're up against, and here's what we're doing to try and offset that. And so their role really became like key communicators and constantly being proactive with it, like so that we're not on the back foot. On the other side of that, we also had we did have some performance issues. It was always going to happen. It was inevitable.
Yeah.
But the thing that helped us was that over communication piece, but then looking at quick wins, like the reactive stuff that I said there, thinking on our feet, but going back over old campaigns that worked really well and then updating the data or looking at them through like a COVID lens worked really well as well, because you already have the design done. You already have a lot of, the research and stuff like that done. It takes half the time to pivot something that's already live on site than to come up with something completely new. And also the clients are really happy because you're making that content, again, work harder. And because you've already built links to some of those assets, like, 20, 30, 40 links, whatever it may be, when you relaunch it, you can go back out to some of those writers and say, hey, we've updated it with, in new insights on how this industry is getting through COVID, or new data points on how COVID has impacted the travel industry and trends and stuff like that. So because we had already had those links, it meant that we already had a way in with some of the relationships that we'd built with writers, and therefore our chances of success in building those links were a bit stronger than if we were going out with a completely new campaign.
Unbelievable. Well, I think it's fascinating. One of the things, we can I've gone over the gory details because it fascinates me, but there are some lessons about what's actually working. And so some of the things that you talked about already, kind of this, kind of quick strike, quick action and reactive modes, but you mentioned that may not be sustainable. One of the things you mentioned just now is that there are some tried and true ways of getting links. What was working prior to the pandemic that's still working today that you found you can go to and you can execute well for your clients?
Yeah, so I think one of the main kind of campaign assets that we've come up with that is kind of tried and tested is these longer form data visualization style reports. So they feel like, they're a big campaign. They can be quite lengthy. They can be quite a big investment in terms of time for yourself and your clients to build and stuff like that. But the good thing about them is that they have so many data points in them. So they're not one-hit wonders. You can slice and dice all of the different data points there so that, if something breaks in the press, you can take that out. You can add in different insights. You can evolve these longer form assets as the world is evolving, which kind of offsets that risk a little bit. So that's quite tried and tested. The other thing that I'd probably stress as well, that has continued to work really well for us is really holding on to the fact that you're still the expert. So we've all gone through a bit of a wobbly time, but if you don't back yourself and your knowledge and instill that continued trust in your client, they're going to start to be nervous about what you're doing and stuff like that. So keeping them on that journey with you and saying, this is, look, we found this insight piece here, or there's a small pocket of the internet. You know, we've done a link intersect analysis and we think you should go after mother and baby press and news online sites that relate to mother and baby and stuff like that. As an example, we're going to build a campaign that goes after those links and gets you links to build your backlink authority and profile in that way. Still, nothing's changed in terms of those processes. I'm not sure if I'm being quite clear here, but some of the tried and tested tactics like link intersect work and stuff like that, they can still really feed into ideation and mean that you are doing the right thing and building the right campaigns. Just because COVID has come about and shaken things up doesn't mean that some of your basic principles need to change. It's just the outputs that need to be slightly tweaked and pivoted in that sense.
Awesome. Well, there's some longer term suggestions in this talk too. I love a good 3-letter acronym. You have one, ROR, which I want to make sure I get right. As a relevancy, opinion, and resolution. Walk us through this. This was interesting to me. So walk our audience through this and how you've seen it play out with your clients.
Yeah, so this all started because so we work with, you guys will probably Greg will 100% know him, Mark Johnson. So he headed up the creative team at Distilled and the function there. Okay. He's well known for kind of creating huge viral pieces. So we've worked with Mark, and he's kind of been a mentor of mine for some time. And as this was all evolving prior to COVID, he helped us build out like an 8-step validation process for some of these longer form evergreen campaigns that, you know, as I mentioned, they look a couple of months ahead and stuff like that. As we were in the thick of it, we were ideating like in those 9 o'clock meetings in the morning, and we were going, what's going to work? How do we do it? We didn't have the time and headspace to then take that idea and put it through an 8-step process. We needed to really streamline it down and go, what are the 3 things that are going to help us know that this idea is going to stand the test of time and it's going to be able to stand up against the news agenda? So relevancy is making sure that it's not just from a link perspective with relevancy. So obviously Google, the way that the direction is going with algorithms and stuff like that. Yes, we are rewarding relevant and quality links over ones that don't necessarily matter as much in terms of relevancy and stuff like that. But this is to do with your brand. So one of the biggest things that we're seeing in the industry at the moment is kind of differentiating between content that can go out and get links and deliver versus content that's actually meaningful and that your brand should be talking about it. And the way that we know that Google is going and the direction that the industry should be taking, relevancy is going to be bigger and bigger and more important. So the relevancy question is really like, if you're pitching this into a journalist, are they going to question why your brand is talking about it? Right. If it's too far off piste, don't do it, because it just means that you're going to get questions, and that if you're thinking it's not right, don't do it. Yeah. The opinion piece comes down to, again, what I was saying earlier around having these packages for journalists to cover for you, having a face or making sure that your brand can have a solid opinion on a campaign, a data point, whatever it may be, means that you're likely offering insights or a point of view that your competitor isn't. That could be your CEO, your CTO, your HR manager talking about the data and insights, and having a bit of a controversial out there opinion is also helpful as well, especially if you want to improve industries for the better. A really good example would be, again, to look back at that engineering client that I mentioned, talking about women in STEM and how that that industry needs to be improved. And we had one of the key stakeholders within the business. She was a female. She had an amazing engineering degree from a top university in the UK. She had, helped lots of businesses through. So having her speak about our campaign and being that voice that can demonstrate those insights meant that, again, it was only going to strengthen it, and therefore it was good. And then the last point there, I forgot my own framework. How embarrassing. No, I'm so into this talk. This is I get so carried away with things. So yeah, we've got relevancy, opinion, and
resolution is the third one.
Resolution. Yeah. So that comes down to doing good. And we saw in the news agenda again with some of our campaigns, journalists wanted to cover news items that were making things better in the world and that had a positive spin because there was so much negativity around COVID and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
So can your brand actually help offer a solution? Can they try and change things for the better? And that shouldn't be transparent. We don't want an opinion that says, oh, we could invest this amount of money in that. Like, no, we actually want you to think to do better. This is a good output, and this is what that translates into for the industry. And, shedding a light with some really challenging data results or having a slightly controversial opinion or an out there headline, that is going to be offering a bit of a resolution because it could be opening up a conversation that needs to be had in a specific industry.
Well, fascinating. And this ROR framework is the first of like a 3-part tactical approach you're beginning to take. The second part of that is production format libraries. Can you kind of unpack that for our audience, or what this means for you guys moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So these came about because, again, when we were in the midst of things, time was of the essence, right? So when we have a campaign idea, yes, the news agenda was changing so quickly, and we were starting to kind of, Paddy actually did a massive research piece around the best performing formats for link building and what formats tend to work really well for us and our clients in terms of getting sustainable, quality, relevant links. So we overlaid that piece of work, which said things like indexes, interactive, radial bar charts, maps, and stuff like that work really well, with looking at the news agenda and thinking, okay, we've got a really good idea. How do we get this out quickly and efficiently? Because who knows, in a week's time, something else could change again, and this idea might not be relevant. So our designer and our web development team, we kind of all got together and we picked 3 formats that worked really well, that had been kind of tried and tested. We essentially created wireframes for them and code. That meant that if our team had come up with a similar idea that could be visualized in that way, then we take that wireframe and we make it completely bespoke for clients. So you don't want to look at 2 different things. It's really important that we're giving TLC and time and love to these campaigns for clients as well, because we're paying for them. But it meant the foundations of the visualization from a design perspective and also the foundations from a coding perspective were already there. So it it made things so much more efficient so that we were able to get things out quicker, basically.
So you gain this huge speed advantage, which is so important. So awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's close the loop. This is, I said there were 3. The third one is promotion, managing unforeseen circumstances. Man, you really make the point about those unforeseen circumstances. How does this third tactic play out?
Yeah, so this was something that we experienced quite a lot. So as the news agenda was changing, as our working lives were changing, as we were all forced into this kind of situation that, it was going to go down in history, right? Our children and our children's children are going to be learning about this in their history lessons. So in light of that, I think when we were starting, so imagine that you have this idea and we've come up with it really quickly. It's gone through design and we're at a point where we're going to launch it. And this relates to almost on the day when we go into that 9 o'clock kind of war room, that newsroom war room that I spoke to you guys about. We find a story that means we can't launch it because of whatever reason, or there's been a delay, or it's not quite right. Or I think the example that I used within the MozCon deck was around, we had a really nice aspirational campaign around kind of Caribbean holiday destinations. And as the COVID story and stuff like that, the notions were unfolding, Maldives was basically put on a bit of a red list, and it went into complete lockdown before the UK and the US did. On the day that we were supposed to launch our campaign around, 5-star luxury resorts and stuff like that in the Caribbean and in the Maldives and the South Indian Ocean and stuff like that, there is no way we can be trying to get people to travel to these luxurious destinations when they're currently being locked down. So part of this comes around just being open and transparent, and your account managers or your consultants, your leads, whoever is in that position with the client, to make calls very, very quickly. Now, we all know the time and effort that goes into campaigns, and you want to launch it because you've produced it and you're excited about it. But sometimes in that split second, you have to put your ego to one side and go, it's not the right thing to do. And we should hold off. We should let the dust settle. And you know what? Clients might be frustrated, but it's all for the greater good, because once you let that news agenda die down, you can make some small tweaks to your campaigns and you can ensure that it goes off and delivers in terms of, link building outputs and stuff like that. You don't want to kind of cut your nose off to spite your face in that sense. And it's really frustrating, but sometimes it's the right thing to do, that when these big unforeseen things come through, you just pause, take stock, say it's not the right time to launch. We're going back into the drawing room and we'll come back again.
What a skill. And it's clear. It's clear evidence that you guys have this great team that you can do that, because there's probably going to be some disagreement. Some people aren't going to be on board with that. So
definitely.
Well, listen, Shannon, it's an amazing talk. You guys, I'm a huge fan of yours after watching it, and your agencies, and just your kind of approach to this, because you're right. Not many agencies would share this stuff, and it's so valuable as an agency owner to learn from others. And so I wanted to say that to your face. If people want to reach out to you, how should they do that?
So Twitter is always great. My DMs are always open. I'm happy to answer any questions or, give words of advice and stuff like that. I think we've all gone through some crazy times in the last kind of 12 to 18 months. And, things are definitely on the up. And as we get used to this whole new normal that everybody's talking about, just believe in yourself, trust your gut and your instincts. You're the expert at what you're doing. Take a breather. Not everything has to be done at 100 miles an hour, and things will come good. But if you've got any questions or you want to reach out, like Twitter or LinkedIn is always great.
All right. Well, Shannon, I really appreciate the time, and I'm going to give you a virtual cheers from Chicago. And
cheers.
and I look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully at some point. But for now, I'm gonna sign off. We'll be back next week for another episode of Suds Search.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks,